Just a warning, as in the last video that I made, I do want to point out that the comment section down below is basically a free-for-all. If there's spoilers down there, it's only so much I can do. Enter and read the comments at your own risk. I hope you enjoy. If you're anything like me, the prospect of jumping into a brand new Bethesda Game Studios universe is overwhelmingly exciting, and yet when it finally comes, you'll probably end up playing the same character you've played in past Bethesda games. This typically means either picking similar skills, going with a similar type of build, or just playing with the same mindset that you have, no matter if you're playing the Elder Scrolls or Fallout, or in this case, hopping into Starfield for the first time. I know for me, this typically means maximizing every single persuasion skill possible so I can schmooze my way through every conversation without ever having a problem. How is it going, everybody? My name is DeMarco, and today I wanted to go through 5 different unique character quirks, if you will, that you can use one or all of them in order to spice up your playthrough just a little bit to make them feel unique from your past characters that you've played. And you could do this in your second playthrough, your third playthrough. You could use one or all of them whenever you want. And while I am making this video before Starfield officially launches, most, if not all of these will absolutely still be applicable if you're watching this video after Starfield has already come out. So with that said, I hope you find something interesting that you might incorporate into your next playthrough. Let's get started. In any type of film, book, or video game, the best protagonists are usually the ones that have some type of critical flaw. So why should your character in Starfield be any different? Playing as what I call the Flawed Hero means you don't take the skills that you necessarily would in every single other playthrough that you've done before. In fact, not only does it mean you don't take them, you keep them as close or as near to zero as possible so that you need to rely on other skills or other alternatives in order to solve the problems that you're faced with. That could mean that you don't take crafting skills, so you need to strictly rely on the type of gear that you either purchase from merchants or that you find through loot. It might mean you don't take ship-based skills in Starfield, so that you need to make sure the crew you bring on board your ship can complement the skills that you lack. As I said earlier, my guilty pleasure is always taking charisma, so I probably will leave that as close to 0 as possible so that I can't just talk my way out of every single situation. And let me just say, for charisma in particular, I always find it fun to not have that skill. Often, failing the charisma check is more memorable of an outcome than if you can pass every single one. It means you can't just talk the gate guard from leaving his post so you can go into the room. It means your favorite NPCs might get killed.
Off we go to another adventure!
All more memorable than if you just charm your way through every situation. Again, the idea behind this is these self-imposed handicaps to your skill set that you normally would take will make you approach the game in a different way than you have before, and you could even roleplay it out with the character that you're going. Why can't they perform those specific skills? What happened in their past? It helps you define the character you're playing as. Another thing that I like to do to make characters feel a bit more unique from one another is to make them collectors of a particular type of item in the game, typically tied to whatever backstory or headcanon I'm going with for that character. Now, we don't know exactly the types of items, specifically the miscellaneous loot that's going to be available in the game, but there's so many different ways that you can approach this. The first time I really saw this being done was a Let's Player of old that did Oblivion Let's Plays I watched years and years ago when I was really young, called Nagidal, and he would, in Oblivion, collect 2 of every article of clothing and 2 of every mead or wine that he could find in the game. And the interesting thing about this is it changes the perspective of your character when you're looting items. So absolutely, that pair of gray space sweatpants might be more valuable to your collector character than the shiny weapon that you find in the display case. It's all about getting in the head of your character. It's all about the roleplay. It challenges you to pick up items you normally would ignore, and you can collect anything that you want in the game, especially with the outpost system where there's almost certainly going to be some type of display rack system that's there. You can make it pieces of armor, you can make it 2 of every weapon in the game, you could collect whatever you want it to be, but it just gives your character an incentive to pick up specific types of items and to prioritize that loot, again, based around the type of character you're playing. If you're playing a geologist character, you might collect every single mineral that you can, leaving none behind, regardless if you plan to use it for crafting. There's a lot of fun ways you could approach it. Another interesting thing about the collector type trait or quirk that you can try to self-impose is if you find an NPC or a shopkeeper that has a particular item your character is keen to get their hands on, how far are they gonna go to get it? Speaking of specific items to pick up, this one I particularly enjoy to help the lack of economy system that's often present in Bethesda games. By this I mean, if you notice a couple dozen hours in, whether it's Elder Scrolls or it is Fallout, you'll end up with way more money than you can ever hope to spend, or you just have so much junk and loot that you've collected that the merchants don't have enough money to buy it all, and you end up with this chest of literal junk. Other times I feel as though you just get too much money too quickly in the game, and so this is a type of system that, again, helps to get me into a bit more of a role-playing mindset for my character, while also artificially halting some of that economy, and I call it the passive looter. Effectively, what playing as a passive looter means is you only pick up specific types of items that are relevant to your character. So if you're playing as this roguish, lightly armored, quick on their feet type character, you're not picking up every single heavy weapon and gigantic heavy piece or heavy spacesuits that you find just because they're worth a lot of money. To use Elder Scrolls as an example, if I'm playing a warrior type character, I might choose to ignore soul gems or magical staves or magical robes, those types of items, because my character just either doesn't know the value of them or just isn't interested in those types of things. Another example I can give is if you're playing a science or a techie type character, then you might not pick up every single piece of weapon or armor that you find unless it's genuinely better than the gear you're already wearing. Now, what's interesting about Starfield in particular is we know that shipbuilding has explicitly been called out as a late game thing because it's very expensive, and so those credits are going to come in handy. However, just consider trying this one out to really help with the role-playing of your character, their perspectives, and what they find interesting or not interesting within the world. This one is probably actually one of my favorites, and I call it bad-tempered. Now, that doesn't mean you go around in Starfield angry at every single character you come across, but it does mean that you make some harder decisions you normally wouldn't do. Again, all to get in the mindset of your character and roleplay a bit differently. A lot of us always like to play a goody two-shoes type of character, try to make everybody get along, solve all the problems, be the hero, and everybody loves you and you go about your day adventuring throughout the stars. However, in this playthrough, I might encourage you to stand by some very firm beliefs. If you're playing a character that's very loyal to the UC and someone goes against those values that your character would have, challenge them. You might have the charisma skill to charm them enough or intimidate them enough to stand down, but if it's something your character wouldn't believe in, why would you do that?
If you've got morality issues, this definitely isn't the job for you.
Especially when a Bethesda game offers the replayability, and Todd Howard has recently talked about an interesting take on New Game Plus for Starfield to encourage you to keep playing the game. There's so many opportunities to try out different types of characters, and the more that you get into a specific build or specific mindset, the more unique every single character can feel. And if you try to use this particular quirk, it might help every character feel unique the time you start your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, your sixth, your seventh, however many playthroughs you plan on doing. Looting items in a Bethesda game is such an important part of it. Here's another one for you that I like to call broken beyond repair. You maybe also could call it something like respectful adventurer, but there you go. In a similar vein to what I called the passive looting trait, this one, indifferently, you don't loot any armor off of bodies. This you could headcanon because it simply doesn't fit you, you could headcanon because it's too damaged to use yourself, or you could simply argue that it's pretty disrespectful to just take every piece of gear off of an enemy and leave them there on the floor basically naked. When you play with this quirk, you typically would want to just take armor that you find in chests. Again, it's part of a headcanon, it could be part of slowing down the economy in these games a little bit. However you want to justify using this trait for yourself, go for it. I have one more for you just because I like these types of character quirk type situations to make playthroughs a bit more interesting. This one I like to call True Mercenary. The idea behind playing a true mercenary character is you will not go off adventuring unless you're paid to go to a particular location. This means you're not flying to random dungeons, random outposts. It's not worth your life or risking your crew's life unless you're getting some sort of compensation out of it. Now, for most people on their first playthrough, I suspect you wouldn't want to do this because, of course, Starfield's all about exploring, but certainly on any future one that you go on once you've experienced the game a little bit, this might be an interesting way to sort of explore the settled systems and see the types of experiences your character has when they're strictly locking themselves to paid jobs. Or, of course, favors. I'm sure you're going to have some friends and companions you make along the way that ask you to do something for them. That If you're willing to risk your life for it, maybe. If you ever play with any character quirks of your own, let me know what they are down in the comment section below. If you have ideas that are different from what I said, and if you're going to use any of these, let me know as well. I look forward to hearing all about it. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.